Okay, so in part one we've gone through what all the setup requirements so that we can build an STS, a token server, and hopefully we did all that correctly and it's going to work. So now what we're going to do is actually create the server using the NetBeans wizards. Okay, so we'll just create a new project, and it's got to be a web application. And just to keep things simple, we'll call it STS, Secure Token Server. Next, and we're just going to take the defaults here. Of course, we're not going to deploy this on Glassfish, so we're going to take most of the defaults here. We're not going to use any of the frameworks. Okay, we'll let that happen. Okay, so we have our project created. Now the next thing we want to do, okay, we'll just close this and let it do its thing. Yeah, the VM's running a little slower than my normal Windows machine does. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new thing, and we'll say other, and we'll go down to the web services here, and what we're going to do is create a secure token server. Next, we're going to call it STS provider, and we're going to call it org.sts as the package, and then we'll do finish. Okay, we'll let that do its thing. It's going to take a second or two. It's basically going to do, it's going to compile our service and create our generated code. Okay, now here's where some of the setup we did comes into play. If we don't have the endorsed library set up correctly, whereas we have the JAX WS22 library properly installed into our JDK, we would get errors in our generated code, and I'll show you where that is in case you end up getting the errors. So what will happen here is in the JAX 2.1 libraries, these constructors are not correct. They won't match. So if you don't have the endorsed libraries installed correctly, all of these will be errors here in NetBeans. So by having that web service API library installed in the endorsed library in the JDK, we won't get these errors here. So that's one of the things that gets fixed by putting those endorsed libraries in. Okay, so in case you get that error, you'll know what it is. Alright, so now the next thing is all the errors involved, if we don't do everything else correctly, will be involved in deployment. So we're going to need this here because these things are going to help us in our next part, which is here and here. Okay. So we see here the problem here is that when it generates our web XML, there's three problems with this actually. The two problems are this is not the implementation classes that we need, and it doesn't create the listener that's required to actually load these things up correctly in the deployment in Tomcat. So we're going to fix that now. We're going to go here. Let's see, we'll close that. Open this. Okay, and we're going to look at our web XML here. Okay, so this is the listener we need. Okay, we're going to paste that in. Okay, the other thing we need to do is here's the servlet class we need. This is the implementation class. This is actually part of the web service API. Okay, so these get deleted and replaced with that. Actually, both of these will use the same one. Okay, So that's done. Now the next thing we need to do is fix our JAX-WS by putting in the correct endpoint for the STS itself. You notice it creates the endpoint for the MEX for the metadata, but it doesn't put in the one for the actual STS endpoint. So we're going to get that out of here. Okay, we're going to put that in here. Okay, now let's open these up. Okay, so when we look at this, of course this has to match our implementation class of our provider. Okay, so it's going to be the package name plus the class name, obviously. So you would change this to match whatever it is you picked for your implementation class. This doesn't matter, it's just a name. Our endpoint here has to match what NetBeans generated here. Okay, so webinf WSDL STS provider, STS provider service.WSDL, and that's what we have to have here. And since I created this myself from the pre-existing one, it does match. But if it doesn't, you can just copy and paste it from here and paste it right into there. The next thing is your URL patterns have to match what's in your web XML. So in our case, it's the STS provider service, and since I copied this from one that I already had working, of course this is going to match. But if you pick different names, which you certainly can, this is where you'll have to get the information in order to match it up in the JAX-WS XML file. Okay, so we'll go back there. Now let me double check what I have here. Okay, so that's all set up. The next thing we have to do is create our validator. Okay, because we're going to need a username password validator so that when the client authenticates into our STS to get a token, we have some means of validating its username and password. And for our test, we have something basically contrived for that. So we'll go here and we'll go back here. We can close this. We can look at our it's our plain text validator. Okay, go here. Let's open this up a little bit. Alright, so that's the class we're going to create. So we're going to go here, right click, create a new Java class, give it that name. Okay, we're going to get rid of this, and we're going to copy all of this into here. Save that, hopefully with no compiler errors. Okay, now of course we're just testing here, so we got it hard-coded. Normally you probably wouldn't want a plain text validator, you would want some kind of encrypted one, and you would probably want to do like some sort of LDAP lookup here, which is what I am definitely going to do once I get past what I'm trying to do here, which is basically get enough working in a test environment so that I can turn the SOAP monitor on and see these messages go back and forth, so I can get a better understanding of what these assertions look like. That's the whole plan here. So right now we just want to get an STS working, get a dummy service working, and a dummy client set up so that we can basically look at these SOAP messages in a monitor going back and forth. That's one of the other reasons why we're doing this on Linux, because we have more tools available to do that on Linux than we do on Windows. Okay, so alright, so now we have our plain text password validator installed. Now what we're going to do is actually set up the configuration for our STS. Okay, so we would go here. So when we created the web service, we have, of course, our source code is here, but NetBeans is putting this web service thing that it uses, and this is where we would actually right-click in order to edit our web service attribute.